Removing assisted area status, as the government did in the early 80s, has been quite damaging for towns like Sowerby Bridge. It means that firms are attracted to neighbouring towns, and we're just the hole in the middle of the donut. They move out to Bradford or Leeds, where they can attract the grant.
Well, who is benefiting then from these schemes, these government-sponsored businesses?
Well, it appears to me that the government and its friends are benefiting. A huge amount of taxpayers' money is being put into these schemes, and it's allocated through a totally unaccountable quango, the MSC, and then the businessman comes along at the end of the day and reaps the rewards of what has been exploitive labour and huge handouts of taxpayers' money. Now, that's not Mrs. Thatcher's competitive society standing on its own feet. That's taxpayers actually funding the very rich.
How do you think the Industrial Museum affects our concept of history?
I'm afraid to a certain extent it tends to glamorise and romanticise the past, when in fact the past was not a very easy place for the people who were taking part. If we look at some of the mortality rates in this area, for instance, then I think people would get a better idea. And I don't think there's a tendency to romanticise what was happening to ordinary people. We tend to look backwards, I think, as a nation, because the truth is there's very little on offer for the future for many people in our society. And this dressing up in historical costumes, I think, is all part and parcel of that. Nostalgia.
Well, this machine going around knits socks. I can do one sock in half an hour, complete. In take 6 or so inch over. All right, this one has 60 needles in. At present moment, we're running nylon yarn. The back of there's some nylon yarn, and there's wool. You can knit practically anything. Now, this is a very interesting part of beam engine. It's an airframe engine, which was built.
I left the Navy in '69. I worked 12 years as a maintenance mechanic. I was 2 years unemployed. Then I worked here on the Manpower Services Scheme, rebuilding these engines. I don't like the money. Peanuts. But other than that, I love it.
Yeah. The way I came about it, I worked at Crossley's, John Crossley and Sons. And then, of course, they went to the war in 1982. And I got a job with Coverdale MSC scheme. I started in early '83. I'm just part-time fitter with them. Yes. And then this loom came available about mid '83, and they brought it. I wasn't in charge of bringing it here, but I was in charge of putting them back together again. I was a loom tuner as an apprentice fitter. Yes. Worked through to being a loom tuner. Responsible for looms similar to this, a number of looms, keeping the material and the machinery in the right order, so that they were produced in the best quality.
During the First World War, the West Riding area in general must have produced most of the blankets, the uniform. The webbing was made in Calderdale, and you think of how many soldiers there were and how much of this stuff had to be made. It was millions of miles of the stuff. And this must have been the zenith of the industry.
The regimental march of the Royal Engineers, Wings.
In 1918, when the troops marched in triumph, they probably didn't expect to find a changed world. Within 7 or 8 years, the government had to resort to an Emergency Powers Act and to bring in troops and police to run the docks and the railways. And it's a very sad betrayal, perhaps, of the workers who went off and fought, and many didn't come back from the First World War. After the Second World War, when they came back and voted in unanimously Labour, socialist government, they were reminded, I'm sure, in 1945, of what had happened in the 1920s and the betrayal of those who fought in the trenches on the Somme and in Passchendaele and in the Western Front.
We are the Royal Engineers. We'll meet the enemy by and by. All the lads of the regiment are willing to do or die. We are the Royal Engineers, next to the Navy on the sea. And if it wasn't for the Royal Engineers, boys, where the hell would the Air Force be? That's a reference to the RFC.
I have many vivid dreams, and the dead move casually through them. They pass and smile, the children of the sword. The men who were boys when I was a boy, but the men who were boys when I was a boy are dead. Indeed, they never even grew to be men. They were slaughtered in youth, and the parents of them have gone lonely. The girls they would have married have grown grey in spinsterhood, and the work they would have done has remained undone. Probably I should not be writing this book now if thousands of better men had not been killed. And if they had been alive still, it is certain that I should have been writing, if at all, about another and better England. I have had playmates, I have had companions, but all are gone, and they were killed by greed and muddle and monstrous cross-purposes, by old men gobbling and roaring in clubs, by diplomats working underground like monocled moles, by journalists wanting a good story, by grumbling debenture holders, by strong, silent, beribboned asses, by fear or apathy or downright lack of imagination.